that we are all able to gather together today. We have an extraordinary program. It's a little bit different from what we usually do, but I think you're going to enjoy it very much. Just a few brief words as always about Women to Watch and this exhibition series that is really this wonderful partnership between the museum and our outreach committees, both national and international. And this is the 6th installment of our Women to Watch series. And as many of you know, they're usually focused around a particular theme, often a medium. And this year is no different. This year's theme is works of paper. So not on paper, but actually works constructed out of paper. And this is our largest Women to Watch exhibition to date. We have 22 participating committees, so that means 22 participating artists. And today we are going to be speaking to Luisa Pastor, who is representing our Spanish committee. So I'd like to extend our thanks and appreciation to the Spanish committee, particularly Sofia Barroso and Maura Marvao for their leadership. So today, because Luisa, even though we assure her that her English is fantastic, she would rather have a conversation in Spanish. And so Amparo Lopez Corral, who is the liaison curator for our Spanish committee, has very kindly agreed to make a presentation of Luisa's work and then have some conversation with her and serve as translator as well. So like I said, it's a little bit different today, but I think it will be really interesting. And as Carolyn mentioned, I will keep an eye on the chat box, on the Q&A. And so at the end of the presentation, we will try to get as many of your questions answered as we can directly from Luisa and Amparo. So I would like to introduce Amparo Lopez Corral to you. She has an amazing record of producing and coordinating contemporary art projects in Spain. And among her many other roles and accomplishments, she is a member of the Spanish Institute of Contemporary Art and the Spanish Women in the Visual Arts Association. And so we've really just had a great pleasure working with Amparo on this project. And it's really nice to be able to, even though we can't get together in person, to see you and to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon there in Washington, and good evening here in Madrid, Bilbao, and others. Thank you for your introduction, Jeannie. I would like to introduce you to Luisa Pastor. She will say some words now. Luisa, ¿querrías saludar al público?
Hi, everyone. I am so sorry not to be able to express myself in English, but I wish to have the opportunity to publicly convey my gratitude. I thank you so much, Amparo, for the dedication and love you have prepared my work for this visual visit. I also thank the organization of the museum and the curator, Caroline and Jeannie, for this fantastic moment to present my work. I wish to have choose my friend and director of the Nordes Gallery for having faith in my work, and to Christian for the contract loan to the artwork for the exhibition. And finally, I wish to express my gratitude to all of the art lovers who are sharing this virtual space with me now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Luisa. Okay, so now let's start the studio visit. I would first make some comments, brief comments on your biography. And I would start sharing my screen here. Yes. Okay, Luisa was born in Monforte del Teith in the east coast of Spain in 1977. And she received her bachelor's degree in fine arts from Granada University and an extraordinary PhD in Fine Arts from the Miguel Hernández University in Elche, in Spain. And most recently, she received a graduate degree in photography from the JYM Art and Culture in Mexico City. She has won many awards, fellowships, and grants, primarily from cultural institutions in Spain and Mexico, such as the postdoctoral fellowship program of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the so-called UNAM, in the Institute of Aesthetic Research, and the production fellowship Bilbao Arte, where she's right now until December. Luisa is in Bilbao, working on a new project. Her work has been exhibited in Spain and also in Italy, Portugal, Guatemala, and Mexico. And her work is also present in public and private collections, Spanish, German, and Mexican. Among others, Otazu Foundation in Navarra, Tatiana Bilbao Collection in Mexico, Mico Collection in Vigo, the Public Official Collection of Government of Valencia, and the Diputación Collection of Malaga and Alicante. And as you will see throughout this studio visit, paper has always been an element present and essential to Luisa Pastor. When asked what drew her to paper as an artistic medium, she says, "I have always been drawn to work with papers I find in flea markets or antique stores, because I'm interested in rescuing the traces of time imprinted on paper. After all, each piece of paper I use rescues the patina of time, providing a series of subtle nuances and small imperfections that inscribe the mark of difference in each of the works I make. Working with paper allows me to disarticulate in a plastic and conceptual way the rational and discursive language that structures the accounting books and journals. From the fragment and the dissemination, I can create new heterotypic scenarios capable of subverting the logic of hegemonic discourse, searching for a new poetic language." Luisa Pastor invites us to a deep reflection. She seeks out utilitarian paper, such as bookkeeping ledgers, blueprints, and historical documents, to create sculptural collages and installations, placing words in a new, different way, in a way where they weren't originally conceived to be. So let's take a look now to a selection of her works and explore these peculiar narratives she creates with paper. We would like to start this studio visit showing you the Machine series and the surrealistic stories. These are works from an early moment in Luisa's career. She started using paper as a base for her work, on top of which she added different elements. In this series, Luisa recreates fictional scenarios with her collage. Using the small scale as a starting point, she wants to generate in the viewer a larger approach from the miniatures to the perception of a larger scale, a narrative created by the addition of different fragments, kind of a moving gaze that shifts through the work from the detail to the global. And so we have the shoebox, the fishing crane, and this work, Some Are Chased by the Rain, in which Luisa refers to those persons who are always under the rain, in trouble, suffering permanent conflicts and storms. And the forest, which is made up with burned matches. And you can see this one is a clear allusion to the way we're exploiting our woods and the damage that the economic interests are causing to nature. And she wants to remind us about this lost. This series is completed by some collage in which Luisa is willing to generate movement without an electrical circuit, such as this manometer, in which the gentle rubbing of a cotton ball on the surface of the metaclite that frames the work generates a subtle random motion of the peacock feathers. And now let's take a look to a more recent series, the Deconstruction series. Debit-credit balance are not only the words with which she plays, it's also the title of the project she has been developing and the starting point of her PhD research. This research focused on the rupture of rational and discursive language and the poetic and conceptual capacity of the fragment. She plays with a broken language, questioning or subverting the rational logic of the contemporary world. This project ended with an exhibition at the Nordeste Gallery in Santiago de Compostela, up in the northwest of Spain, in the city where the Way of St. James ends. In her deconstruction series, Pastor uses old bookkeeping ledgers, and she cuts and folds the sheets, playing with the written words, deconstructing and questioning former structures. She builds new narratives, working with an ironical approach, calling upon the text used in the old books. Pastor addresses the relations between the theory of value and the theory of linguistic sign in order to question the strict rules that regulate the use of these books of financial accounts. And as you can see in this series, Luisa no longer uses paper as a base. She starts using paper as a medium with which she builds this sculptural collage. And let's start this series with one of the works that you will see in Paper Roots exhibition and that has been kindly loaned by a German collector, Fold Topology. In this work, Luisa wants to create an alternative topology. She alters the structure of the books in order to reveal a new language. Developing a complex process of assembly, she builds up a new structure by overlapping fragments, a series of boxes that in turn contain other boxes. Luisa is interested in the movement of return on itself, which builds the fold, and the self-referential movement of each of the fragments. As you can see, Luisa dismantles the single plane of the notebook, the one necessary for its traditional performance. She aims to inspire a different approach, a new language, exploring different positions, new meanings, and different narratives, disrupting the conventional use of language. In this other work, the irony behind an identification that belongs to Colección Tatiana Bilbao art collection in Mexico. As I said, in this work, Luisa analyzes the relations established between workers, trabajadores, and money. She plays with the signifier, the words in the notebook, and the signified, the sign or physical form, and the concept or idea expressed by the sign or word. According to Saussure, the Swiss linguist and philosopher, the sign can be altered by a change in the relationship between the signifier and the signified. Inspired by Saussure ideas, Pastor wants to create a new ironic identification which will imply the representation of the value of a worker only in terms of money. Here's another work by her of this series, The Damage of Dissemination. In this collage, Luisa has worked with every sheet of the book, this time inspired by the reader's idea of dissemination. She cuts the words and the spaces that shape its structure, so to make a broken, fragmented language which marks what the reader called the text interruption. In order to visualize the cuts in the words and in the sheets, Pastor plays with the word damage, daño, which he has left intact to remark the symbolic implications of the word in relation to the economic discourse of capitalism. This void is also connected with his other work, The Irreverence of the Void. Having in mind the concept of archaeology, Pastor excavates in the internal structure of the bookkeeping ledger in search of a physical and poetic void provided by the hole in the center of the book. Here we have another work, which is Poetics of Contradiction. This work establishes unexpected connections between the container and the content. She makes again small boxes with the paper of old invoices, and she explores the ability of numbers and words when they are no longer a term related to a merchandise of economic exchange, transforming them into poetic elements. Again, playing with the void, this work, The Game of the Void and the Silence, is a work in which, by overlapping the different sheets of paper, Luisa hides the words in this work, hindering the accounting practice and the record of the company's account, questioning the economic discourse of capitalism through the reverence of silence. As you know, connotation refers to the positive and negative associations that words have, whereas denotation is the definition of a word to be found in a dictionary. Pastor builds a structure with which she intends to create a connotative physical void by undermining the denotative meaning of language. The next work is Juxtaposition of Signifiers. Through the reduction of the writing spaces this time and striving to fill the place where the payment deadlines are registered, Luisa destroys the functionality of the ledger by condensing the spaces that order the economic discourse. The words lose their privileged place, creating a free chaos and trying to occupy a place which they no longer own. And again, working with the concept of archaeology, this piece, The Archaeology of the Metaphor, is inspired by the concept of metaphors through the internal and vertical movement of meaning, condensing the different elements of the collage. Pastor says she excavates the words in a vertical way, destroying the possibility of reading them in a proper way and thus extinguishing its functionality. Now we come to intertextual mosaic, made with a bookkeeping ledger dated in 1939. This piece belongs to the Otato Foundation collection, and here, by disintegrating the whole book in different fragments, Pastor aims to question the original unity of the invoices record book. She builds a mosaic of disjointed voices, dismantling the rigorous economic logic of the book entries. She declares her transgression and irreverence through a new uneconomic language, one that needs a new and different reading process. Now I want to show you this work, The Unending Displacement of the Object. This work is connected with another of Luisa, the Purloined Letter, inspired by Allan Poe's book, which we will see later after. Pastor deconstructs Allan Poe's tale. I want to tell you, this is a detective story around a letter from the Queen's lover that has been stolen from her boudoir by a Minister D, who is blackmailing the Queen. Dupin is the detective that will recover it, but before doing so, the missing letter will experience a series of movements and displacements, and its content will be never revealed to the reader. Poe's story raised a relevant debate among literary theorists in the 60s and the 70s, and this is the debate that inspired Luisa. Lacan argued that the content of the letter is irrelevant to the story, and that the proper place of the signifier, the letter itself, is determined by the symbolic structure in which it exists and is displaced. Jacques Derrida responded, pointing out what Lacan missed and suggesting that it's not that the letter lacks meaning, but that Lacan made the lack the meaning. Inspired by this discussion, Pastor creates this other work, The Unending Displacement of the Object. According to the theory of Lacan, a letter, the object or signifier, always arrives at its destination because even though it might break in pieces, it will never lose its original meaning. However, according to Derrida, the never-ending displacement of the signifier, the letter, destroys its original meaning in which the logic of capitalism lays. Pastor plays with the words inward, llegada, and outward, salida, used as headers in these books to question the capitalist market model. This work connects us to a third block of works, the book series. We will start the series with the one I just mentioned, the purloined letter, la carta robada in Spanish. This time, Allan Poe's story inspired Luisa in a different way. And I would like to share with you the action behind this work. After knowing about this story, Luisa visited a series of bookstores, and in one of them, she found the book. And she decided to reenact the situation. And she stole a page of the book where it was written, the purloined letter, la carta robada. I must tell you that she went back to the store and purchased the book the day after. So Luisa tore out the 14 pages of the tale included in Poe's collection and covered the text of the sheet she stole the first day with the fragments. The collector who owns this letter has the letter, la carta robada, but its content is hidden. It will not be disclosed. And Luisa keeps the collection in which one of the tales, the purloined letter, is missing. This is not a book, it's another work belonging to this series. In this case, Pastor uses the book of Blas de Otero, one of the most relevant Spanish poets of the 20th century. This is not a book, it's an anthology of texts and poems in which Otero highlights the opposition between the written word and the spoken word. Luisa Pastor combines the poetry of Blas de Otero and its connection to Magritte's painting, This Is Not a Pipe, introducing the viewer to a different way of reading, a surrealistic approach playing with the trickery of images and language. For Luisa, it had to be the first edition. The second wouldn't have been This Is Not a Book. And she proposes us, let's read in a vertical way. Let's break the language to create a new alternative and a different one. And not being a conventional book, but a container of meaning and sounds, we bring you along another work, the score. A score that it's yet to be written, but only apparently. The temporal succession of articulated sounds seems to be missing, but there is our vibration. Challenging traditional conventions, and this time having in mind John Cage, Pastor fabricates 8 staves with cables of different thicknesses in order to provoke an imaginary intensity of silence that increases as the thickness of the strings grow bigger. Fishing line, bicycle brake cable, and hardware store steel cable. All these strings draw a trembling line, an alternative score made of shadows and silences. And now, using old school notebooks, I want to show you the installation. They are all poaching trophies. In this installation, Luisa explores the mechanisms of power that motivate plunder, colonization, poaching, and slavery. Using the animal figure as a metaphor, she aims to highlight the trace of illegal trade and this new kind of colonialism. She combines large-scale reproductions of hunting scenes and documents with a series of intervened covers of old school notebooks. Each animal becomes a trophy covered with gold leaf, a merchandise promoting the development of an hyper-consumerist system. Here you can see the images of the installation shown at the Residencia Plus at the Museum of the University of Alicante in 2019. And here another body of works is the border series. In this series, Pastor works with the deconstruction of canvas, playing once again with the concept of pleat. She folds the canvases, questioning the existing borders of, or limits between the inside and the outside of a painting. In border one, the construction in white, this piece, she focuses on the poetic ability of the fragment, and she uses it as a tool to question the rational discourse of the classical theories of representation. And more precisely, she uses the concept of pleat to question the theories of mimesis, which explored at the beginning of the 20th century the relationship between art and reality through the concepts of imitation, simile, and similarity. Pastor looks for a self-reflexive approach of the canvas, folding it towards its inner limits. She wants to deconstruct the conventional artistic concept of the canvas by its dislocation. Here, in this other work, Border 2, in questioning the limits between the inside and the outside of a painting, she works with the cut and the fissure that tears apart the artistic object. She wants to ponder the economic and political frames configuring the borders, playing with the historical symbolism of gold, exploring the correspondence between the physical space configured by the canvas and the physical space that the territory configures. By cutting the frame and the inner structure, Pastor aims to weaken the traditional foundations of the history of painting, but also she invites the spectator to reflect on the concept of border, that thin border of barbed wire, using the words of the American feminist and queer activist and theorist Gloria Anzaldúa, describing these geopolitical places of death and control. And now let's take a look to another series, the one which is also part of Paper Roots, the Fate of Miscegenation series, El azar del mestizaje. Here, there are three pieces in this series. One is this one that we are seeing now, which is part of a Tazo collection in Spain. And these are the ones that will be exhibited at the museum, at the National Museum of Women in the Arts there in Washington. These works are made with Mexican National Lottery papers. And Pastor's intention is to reflect on the concept of miscegenation, weaving a random fabric created by intertwining the different monochromatic papers, red, yellow, blue, and black. With this series of works, Pastor wants to create a new reconfiguration of the physiognomy of the lottery sheet, subverting the borders established by a hierarchy of the racial system and the economic logic of capitalism. I will also like to add that azar, the word in Spanish, has also other meanings which might be translated to the chance of miscegenation or the gambling of miscegenation. And Pastor also plays with these meanings. And before we start with the questions, I would like to show you a recent work by Luisa. This work was part of the online exhibition hosted by Galeria Nordés in May this year. Chus Villar, the director, asked the artists from the gallery for works made during the lockdown, along with a brief text about the complicated moment we were living. Here, Luisa, well, this is the work presented by Luisa, and I would like to highlight that, remember that she started working with paper as the basis for her work. Then she started using the paper as a medium to build up her collage and her sculptural collage. And now in this one, she's using the adhesive tapes. The black and the yellow elements are adhesive tapes. So she is revealing something that she previously used on the backside, behind the scene, behind the works that she was doing. And now I would like to finish this first blog and studio visit with the reading her statement in response to the pandemic. Michel Foucault said, "What was about to happen did not have its own vocabulary." This pandemic also shakes with force the immune system of rational and discursive language to the point of provoking a wound in the tongue, in the words of Chantal Meillard, which looks at the abyss of language as we face our own fears and the loneliness of death. There, in the crack caused by babbling, other languages sleep through the walls of confinement to offer up, supposed, balm based on imagination, creativity, and desire. And it is from there, from where I try to direct my creative search, to continue reflecting from the fragment, the cut, or the fissure that the scalpel provokes in the leaves of the accounting books of the capitalist system and the contemporary world. Now, at a time when the social, economic, health, or climatic frameworks are cracking, the discipline of collage provides the necessary adhesive to reflect on the new possible structures starting from ruin and decline. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Amparo.
Thank you, Luisa. It was a great pleasure to be your voice. And now I think it's the time for the questions.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was really amazing. You really brought to life Luisa's work for us, and it's I think it was very fitting the way that you closed. It's such a absurd time in many ways, and we often don't have the language for it to express what we are experiencing, what we are going through. Maybe we don't know yet. It's going to take some time to process all of this, but I think Luisa's work really reminds us not only of the possibilities of language, but the limitations of it as well, in a very beautiful, visually beautiful, and evocative way. I appreciated your kind of tying everything into these names that I haven't heard since graduate school, Foucault and Derrida, and you know, it just reminded me of how much depth there is in her work, and how almost deceptively simple it appears, but then to realize that she is using words on paper, and words are the building blocks of communication, but that she's actually taking them and physically using them as the building blocks of her pieces, in really such a unique and interesting way. A few questions about kind of about Luisa's kind of influences and what artists she might look to for inspiration. I appreciated your commentary surrounding surrealism and Magritte for sure, and I also was thinking about Dada as well, and the kind of decontextualizing of language.
Mm-hmm. Luisa, Ginny te pregunta sobre las influencias y tu referencia a Magritte, y también habla de posiblemente la influencia del Dada en tu obra.
Pues claro, evidentemente sí, porque además los dadaístas tenían como, o sea, jugaban mucho con el lenguaje. Entonces, para mí son una influencia absolutamente, y sobre todo Magritte, porque Magritte consigue romper el discurso cuando presenta una pipa y al mismo tiempo la desdice. Y a mí ese juego con el lenguaje me evoca muchas cosas. Entonces, claramente sí.
Yeah, she says there's a clear influence, and that, of course, that she is very fond of Dada movements, and that she really liked the way they played with the language.
Mm-hmm.
So she really liked the way Magritte played with the language and the way it deconstructualized the text and the words.
And are there any women artists in particular that she, whose work she admires? And I'm thinking particularly of those artists that use language, like Barbara Kruger, like Jenny Holzer, particularly Jenny Holzer, as she's using kind of these fragments as well. Does Luisa see any kind of, I guess, what does she think about their work, or has she been influenced at all by their work?
Me pregunta ahora qué mujeres artistas, utilizando el texto, son para ti un referente o de alguna manera pueden haber influido en tu trabajo, como por ejemplo Barbara Kruger o Jenny Holzer, o quizá a lo mejor alguna otra. ¿En qué medida?
En realidad, más que yo creo que artistas visuales, me influyen más escritoras, como por ejemplo Chantal Maillard. Son como, me gusta mucho la capacidad que tiene el texto de evocar una metáfora plástica que a mí me lleva a poder expresar algo que visualmente quizá no me lo provocaría de igual manera, ¿no? Entonces, me gusta más no jugar tanto con artistas, que evidentemente las contemplo, pero me evoca mucho más las referencias literarias a la hora de crear mi trabajo.
That, yes, she likes and enjoys the work of these artists working with text, but she's much more inspired by women writers, such as Chantal Maillard, and the way in which the way they write might evoke or might inspire or might have the capability of expressing in a plastic or express the message in a plastic way. So Luisa uses the text, the written text, to create a plastic work. It's what you were saying before. It's the way in which she creates or she generates a work of art with words. Mm-hmm. So she gives a body to the works, and that's why she is inspired by writers more than by visual artists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. You used the phrase a few times, the poetic fragment, or the poetry of fragments, and it struck me because this idea of fragmentation is something I've been thinking about recently, and particularly positive fragmentation as defined by Lucy Lapard, as a way that marginalized artists, women in particular, deconstruct imagery or of bodies, of buildings, of landscapes, of books, of words, and reconfigure them in such a way to kind of present a new reality, but also to question kind of the status quo. And so I'm wondering if Luisa feels that her work is kind of a positive fragmentation in that regard, or if she can just expound a little bit more on the idea of the poetry of the fragment.
Okay. Me pregunta a ver si de alguna manera esa fragmentación positiva que hay en la obra de Lucy Lapard Y todas estas mujeres que hacen esas desconstrucciones tanto del cuerpo como del paisaje y que luego la reconfiguran para presentar una nueva realidad y que de alguna manera cuestionan el statu quo, si te influyen o si tienes en ella, y si no, en cualquier caso también lo que le ha llamado la atención en varias ocasiones es hablar del fragmento poético, de la carga poética del fragmento. Entonces, bueno, hablar un poco de estas cuestiones.
Bueno, me gustan mucho las artistas que arriesgan y rompen con el lenguaje. Y rompen de manera poética, porque creo que hoy en día romper de manera espectacular me resulta, creo que es relativamente fácil. Entonces, que se rompa con lo mínimo, se rompa con el gesto y que al mismo tiempo se aporte, siempre me parece como una exquisitez, ¿no? Porque aporta a nivel no solo plástico, sino a nivel no solamente estético, sino a nivel metafórico, algo más en la obra. Entonces, las artistas que están rompiendo en su momento con algo que el sistema las oprime, me parece que hay que tenerlas en cuenta. Por ejemplo, a mí una artista que es Hannah Hawk. Hannah Hawk es una de las primeras artistas que hace un collage. En cambio, conocemos al collage como Picasso. Y Hannah Hawk ya tiene un pequeño collage unos años antes de que Picasso lo muestre, ¿no? Entonces, a mí ese tipo de actos que quedan invisibilizados me producen mucho valor para el momento, ¿no? Entonces, sí, por supuesto, estoy de acuerdo con Ginny. Todo ese tipo de artistas, evidentemente, son para mí siempre un referente.
She says that these artists that are brave and they take risks and that we were talking about, such as Lucy Leopard and so on, that she really admires. And that she says that she likes the artists who take the risk and break the language, but in a poetic way. And with the minimum gesture, with providing something else. And these artists that have been breaking the rules, they're always the reference, such as Hannah Hawk, who made a collage even before Picasso.
Yes.
So these women are a reference in her practice and in her life too.
Yeah. Yes, I heard Hannah Hawk in there. I understood that loud and clear. And as soon as she said it, I said, oh, yes. Yeah, of course.
That's a reference, yes.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. So that's about it for our questions. I think it's a testament on part to the thoroughness of your presentation that we don't have more questions, but it was really, really enlightening. Thank you so very much for this. And Luisa, muchas gracias. It was a pleasure to spend time with you today and to hear more about your incredibly thought-provoking work. We sincerely appreciate it. And Amparo, thank you so very much for the presentation and for serving as our translator today.
It's been a great pleasure. It's been a real pleasure to work with Luisa and her work, and to introduce her work to the audience and to let know a little bit more. So we are really pleased that you enjoyed, and thank you for hosting us. Luisa, would you like to say thank you and bye-bye, maybe? Even in Spanish, I can say it, I can translate it after.
Ok, pues nada, darle las gracias, que es un placer siempre hablar de arte y espero vernos pronto en enero.
Yeah, she wants to thank you. That's always a pleasure to talk about art, and that she's looking forward to maybe see each other physically at the NYWA in Washington. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you both so much again, Amparo and Luisa. It I just second everything Ginny said. It was so wonderful to hear from you both, and to see the work so up close. It was so amazing. So we thank you both, and so excited to see it in person and hopefully meet you both in person, as you said, soon when it's safe. Thank you, Ginny, for joining us as well this afternoon. She is at the museum putting up the show right now. So we thank you for taking some time and joining us today. Thank you to the Spain Committee for everything that you do and for your work with Women to Watch throughout these years. So we thank you all so much.